Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to ETCFO.com. This is ETCFO Budget 2022 series. We already had four series every Friday where we discussed the expectations from the leading CFOs of India Inc., from the finance minister, and from the budget specifically. Today is the first and the last session on the budget, but today is a different session. In fact, today it's not about pre-budget, but it's about the post-budget. And again, I have top voices with me which will tell us what is there in this budget, what is that they liked about this budget, and where actually this budget is going to take us. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome the three top speakers that I have here with me. My first speaker for this panel discussion on the budget 2022 is Mr. Kailash Gupta, the CF of Inox. Kailash, glad to have you.
Thank you. Thank you, Amol. Thank you.
My next speaker is Mr. Robin Banerjee, Managing Director, Caprihans India, former Group CFO, Suzlon. He's now currently as the MD of Caprihans India and a renowned name in the India Inc. Robin, glad to have you. And my another speaker, Mr. Kunal Sangvi, will join very shortly. He's a CFO of HDFC Securities. Maybe in a minute or two, he just messaged us that he's going to be here. So Kunal will be here with us. Kunal is already here with us. Kunal, glad to have you.
Yeah, hi. Same here.
Thank you, Kunal. And ladies and gentlemen, let me begin now. I will ask a common question to all the CFOs, but before that, let me tell all my viewers and readers for the support which they have shown in the ETCFO budget series, and the kind of faith they instilled in us, because of which we are carrying this series. Sometimes there are a lot of back end challenges when you are doing a live show, specifically when you are in a pandemic era. COVID is still not ended. And let me tell you, sometimes we also face challenges. For example, we're supposed to have Neetu Kashi Ramka, the CFO of VIP Industries, but unfortunately she couldn't join because of the medical emergencies. And she just told us maybe an hour back, because that was the emergency she faced. And my team must say that Manu Arora, Varti Karawat worked really hard, and people like Kailash Gupta, who are a big supporter to ETCFO, joined at the last minute because of the faith they have in ETCFO, and because they believe they should make their voice and talk about the budget and support us here. So thank you, Kailash, for the last minute change, and also Kunal for joining us at the last minute. So ladies and gentlemen, let me begin our budget series now. So, Kailash, I will begin with you. My first question is, there are many developments which the finance minister has spoken about. They have taken a view for not just 1 or 2 years, but 25 years now. So, what is it that you found very attractive in this budget?
Amol, thank you for inviting me to this forum. The current budget, which is announced by Finance Minister 2 days back, effectively creating a long-term roadmap for the country. And this is very critical and important for all of us to look at the long term and not the election to election or year to year basis. And this is very critical. We are talking about the infrastructure, we are talking about the capex, we are talking about the long term story. We are trying to make India as a hub for the manufacturing and the service industry both. I think in the current scenario and the way the things are happening across the globe, it is important that we lie down the foundation now, because the China is collapsing and everybody is losing the trust in the China. So it is important for India to create a roadmap now, and this is what the finance minister did in this budget speech. While she could have covered more, but unfortunately, because the capex was plan was so high, she could not keep probably something for the middle class or the masses, especially on the tax front. But at the same time, she was also obliged in a way, by not imposing any additional tax, and the regime continued to be stable for last 4 5 years. I think that's very critical and that's very important in this budget. She also tried to simplify and unify a couple of things, on a tax fronts. I think those are very critical and important for from long term perspective. We also she also tried to bring the even the virtual assets in the tax net, etc., which is important for this country, because that's how the world is changing, and probably all those things used to be covered at some point of time. So she did everything best possible, given the limitation on the resources side, given the the kind of size we have in India. I think this is giving a very, very long term perspective to the country. And that was very critical, at this point of time.
Okay, I think good highlights, Kailash. Let me note that, and maybe we'll make some specific questions a little later. But let me bring here Mr. Robin Banerjee. Robin, I would like you to share your perspective in terms of what did you find attractive in the budget, or what were the major highlights according to you, which are really helpful.
Yeah, hi, Amol. What is a budget? Budget is a strategy document of any government. We in business, we make something called an annual business plan. The board of directors and the senior management sits together and decides how the business is going to run the next year and what is going to be the likely sales, profits, assets, and liabilities. This is precisely what the budget document is. The government sits together and decides how they are going to run the country for the next 1 year. The budget document also shows us what is the thinking the government is having, and therefore we, the business community, can adjust ourselves to the government thinking. So when a government sits together to revive an economy, especially post-COVID world, typically the government has two choices. There isn't, to my mind, the third choice. The two choices are: do they make a demand pull, that means pull the demand up, or they work on supply push supply so that people are forced to consume. This budget strategy is supply push. And they said that if I push my supplies, which is nothing else more or less by making investments in infrastructure and capex, necessarily there will be employment, people will have money in their pocket, and the demand pull will happen. They could have done reverse, and that is the criticism we are finding, that many says, why didn't you put money in people's pocket so that they could have started purchasing? But the government thought otherwise. हम supply push करेंगे, we will do supply push and not demand pull. And from the business community angle, this works wonderful for us, because if there is a supply push, means the business has to produce and supply, and willy-nilly it will help the community and the industry as a whole, the country as a whole. So I feel the strategy is perfect, works beautifully, especially after post-COVID period, and in an economy which has tremendous possibility of growth in the near term and near and medium term.
Okay, noted your points and a good clarification on the supply side. Robin, let me bring here Kunal, and let me take Kunal's perspective in terms of what did he find attractive in the budget.
So I think so the most attractive part. So thank you for inviting me. I think so. This actually makes me also think in terms of what the CFO community would also kind of get enticed in terms of with the budget. And since I am also a CFO, and then like Robin was telling, the budget is something which we also in the organizations also prepare a lot, and we also try and kind of have it on a regular basis. The important aspect, most important that attracted me was higher allocation of capital expenditure. So if you see a little over 10 lakh crores of capital expenditure which was there, and at the same time it was a 35% rise over previous year, which is a woofing rise. Means government has taken a very bold call to actually increase the expense at not at any cost, but to try and fund it from wherever it can, be it borrowings or be it increasing the fiscal deficit, but helping the kind of overall community and the ecosystem to go all out and infuse growth. So that is the biggest highlight. The second important highlight is lot of small things. We all call lot of things, be it digital transformation, be it AI or PLI, be it something into solar, or be it also a lot of things into surety bonds, even certain things into our capital gains, and also into income tax procedures, the high court decisioning. This shows that government has gone into details. Finance minister has spent that time in terms of looking at various aspects, and trust me, all of these things, and it's the list is very long, will become the foundation, the seeds to growth in future, because these are addressing a lot of future problems, and at the same time these are able to try and create big exponential returns in future. So overall, I believe these are the kind of things that is going to propel a lot of infusion to the growth in future.
Okay, noted your points, Kunal. And I think since I have opening remarks from all of you now, let me get with some specific questions. And Kailash, let me come back to you now. And the roadmap is clear. The government is going to invest a lot, on the capital expenditure, huge budget. How do you see it panning out now? What difference do you think it will make in the industry, or specifically for your industry? I know the pandemic is still there. The screens are still shut in many cities and the towns. But how do you see, the capex cycle for your company, for your industry going ahead? Oh, Kailash, please unmute yourself.
Okay, so the capex cycle, Amol, in a long term will help everybody. It's not about our industry only, because if the infrastructure is going to grow, I mean,
Hmm,
the lot of urbanization is going to happen, and that is what was indicated in the budget as well. And the
hmm.
urbanization indirectly or directly help us, grow our
Yes.
industry. I mean, the moment the city's limits goes beyond, the current limits. Second is the housing which is coming up, so it will further spread the cities. And it is envisaged that even the 50% of the population will stay in the bigger cities, in the time to
Hmm,
come. I think all these steps will finally develop the infrastructure, the recreation facilities, the
hmm.
expansion of the city limits, and which gives us a lot of scope to, even our industry, especially to setting up a new cinema, new malls in the country.
Okay.
And when we talk about specifically our industry, she has already relaxed, some norms and additional borrowings under the ECGNC scheme,
Hmm,
and
hmm,
that's where it will help us, of course, as an industry, because we are in a stress situation as an industry. But at the
hmm.
same time, I think the steps taken towards the long-term mapping of the infrastructure part, I think that's a long term for us as well. I mean, because the moment your city limit crosses or urbanization increases or infrastructure develops, I mean, it's easy for us to even set up a cinema at a distance, from the outside the city, if you have enough or adequate infrastructure to reach to that place. So that's something which is important and which was highlighted. And of course, on the procedural part, some on the tax part or some on the GST part, I mean, of course, those things will definitely help, uh, across the all the industry.
Okay, noted your points. I think valid points is there, and ECLGS support. I think the extension which they have done to hospitality sector is truly remarkable, considering what they already did, in the first two phases. Uh, Robin, let me come to you. And how do you see the whole capex cycle of the government, which is really highest? Do you see now the CFOs will go to drawing board and think about the capex far more aggressively, because for last 2 years there was some uncertainty. At least this uncertainty, I mean, pandemic uncertainty is there, but at least there is no uncertainty in terms of whether the government will spend or not, because that is already there. So do you see the CFOs are going back to drawing board and making a plans for their capital investments now?
Well, definitely, because infrastructure, well, first of all, the capex, where does the government invest? Not primarily in infrastructure. And if there is infrastructure investment, where does it lead to? Steel, aluminium, cement, mortars, refractories, bricks. So all these automatically starts moving. Now, when all these moves, there is more employment. More employment means more demand. And if there is demand, someone has to fill the demand. And if, for instance, the workers are going to see more movies. Therefore, Kailash will be so happy that his Inox will now get full because people are now having money. Similarly, Kunal will also have investments to be made by these people, so he would be definitely matching up to what the expectation is. So, an infrastructure investment in infrastructure has anything between 3x and 5x multiplier factor. If you look at economics books, it will talk about 3x, but they talk about 3x in short term. It could be 5x in medium term and 10x in long term. Of course, in long term, everyone is dead. So, an infrastructure investment by the government, which while they are saying 7,50,000 crores, I think the effective investment will be 10 lakh crore, up from 5 lakh crore. So almost 100%. The budget government documents are saying 35%. To my mind, it is 5 lakh crore to 10 lakh crore. Even assuming they cannot invest 10 lakh crore, but they can invest 75% of that, which is 7 lakh 50,000 crore. This year they have
Okay.
invested so far about 3 lakh 50,000 crore, 100%
Hmm.
more than today. Therefore, each one of us, each one of the business will definitely go back to the drawing board, see what it means to us. And therefore, can we now match up to the effective demand which is going to come very, very shortly. But the important point is the government must make the expenditure. They must invest. It's not on bits of papers. They must make appropriate expenditure. If they cannot do that, which is operationalize the thinking of the paper, that would be a big disaster. And we do hope that they are able to do the operationalization of what the thinking is.
Hmm. Meaningful one, Robin. Kunal, does it make confident for you? I know, I mean, you doesn't come from a typical infra or manufacturing where the capex is always huge, but still, does it make very confident if you have to make huge capex plans going ahead? And also, what do you learn from the industry in terms of capex plans? Are the CFO community, is the CFO community ready to, pour more money now?
So I think so. This is a very good question, and then it essentially reflects the sentiment and buoyancy and the kind of optimism that the companies will have with respect to how they want to go, because it is also linked to a lot to that. And I would say that there is a very high optimism going forward, and hence, as Robin rightly said, that there will be high demand. What we need to do is we need to build capacity. Capacity is the key going forward. If the capacity is there, we will be able to address the demand and also capitalize on the opportunity, and then the whole cycle will be working well. Otherwise, demand will come and demand will go. If the CFO and the overall industry is ignorant of this particular fact, that there is going to be very high demand, and hence we need to create capacity and ensure that there is sufficient supply to address this demand, then essentially not only we as an economy will go, but we will not miss a very large opportunity. And therefore it will be wrong for any CFO or the industry players to ignore this and not invest in capex. To tell you, although we come from service industry and we have kind of become very close to a fintech kind of an organizations, we do significantly large amount of investments into technology infra, and the capacity and platforms that will address to the customer requirements, because more than 50-70% of our business, in fact 92% of our business is digital. So all the transactions that happen are digital, so our platforms has to be robust. We have done so much investments over previous 18 months into infra technology and into capex, which we may have not done over a period of last approximately 3 to 4 years. So that essentially shows not only at our level but across the industry level. And we, being a broking entity, we are cognizant of all the sectors, including manufacturing, the kind of capacity that is getting created and the robustness that is coming into infra is buoyant, and it's a journey of India as an economy going from 2.7 to $3 trillion to 5 and $6 trillion over a period of next 3 to 4 years.
Okay. Got it, Kunal. I think for you it's a different infrastructure altogether. It's not a typical road and highways or oceans and rivers, but for you it's absolutely digital. So, but great to
But
know
not
that.
necessarily, Amol. I think so. Technology is something that everyone will have to lap into in some form or the other sooner or later. So it's going to be there for everybody.
No, no, true, true. Sure, Kunal. So Robin, with your experience, let me take your perspective in terms of the execution. Sometimes the policies are really good, the rules are really nice, but just get lost into the execution. Planning is always better, and infrastructure is depend on many other aspects. That we need to require land acquisition, and so many other criterias. How do you think that is going to pan out? How do you think the government will, what do you think should government should do to make this infrastructure pipeline really seamless? Because they announced the same even last year, infrastructure pipeline and everything. So they should not get into stuck into execution. What should they do actually now to speed up what they announced?
There are four factors of production: land, labor, capital, organization. And whenever an investment is taking place in infrastructure, all these four has to play seamlessly amongst each other. land, labor, capital organization. Now, the easiest portion is organization, which is nothing else but there are systems, processes, hopefully government has to implement this. To my mind, that's the most difficult because government is not always well organized. That is why they are not able to deliver what they promised to deliver. Because government normally doesn't know how to do business, and this is business. Investment in infrastructure is business. If I now come to the most difficult one, in my view, is land. Land, labor, capital organization, land is the single most important barrier today which is affecting growth. Whether it is a train line, whether it's a bullet train, whatever investments on the long national highways, it is all getting done, but pockets of that is getting stopped. And unless the whole thing is done, nothing will happen. So the government has to focus on how to unlock the land which is getting locked in the whole concept of courts. So the system of the judicial system needs to be actually improved and strengthened. Land cannot be unlocked until the judicial system is sorted out. These two are interlinked. Labor, the government did a lot. They did bring in labor reforms. They passed those laws, but now the state governments have to implement and pass it and implement, which is all got stuck. So labor again has got stuck in some form. Land, labor, capital. Capital, in my view, is adequately available. If there is a good project, there is enough capital, be it private or government. Government has money. Government is essentially doing deficit funding, which is nothing else but printing money. So capital is available. Organization, I'm not too sure whether they will be able to get it all together. So to cut the long story short, if they can get the land, labor, capital organization together, of which capital I believe they have it, land is nothing other than the judicial system. Labor is okay. Even with the current labor laws, I believe the labor can continue. We will be able to implement it. It all boils down to an effective organization and land. So land and organization are the key factors of the four factors of production. And then we are done and dusted.
Okay, valuable thoughts, Robin. Kailash, what do you think? The plan which they have made, which looks really nice, the infrastructure and urbanization plan. What is that two to three things that the government should do specifically along with that in terms of the policy clearances, in terms of ease of doing business for your sector, which will actually help you maybe to set up your next screen far more seamlessly and far more easily than going for 45 windows and getting a clearance from them. So what are those things that you are expecting now?
So while government is laying all the foundation for the long term infrastructure work and everything, I think what the secret lies behind in between the intention of the government vis-a-vis the execution, as Robin said, and execution is where the all the keys lies actually. So the once the political wish or the political announcement comes, the bureaucrats really who are the one who really implement, so the every each and everything. But what we are realizing, one more thing is that in last few years, probably the bureaucracy is also changing in line with what the political wishes, and they are being pushed, hard by the political people, and those people are really going, now, on a door-to-door basis and trying to execute everything. I mean, there are a lot of examples in last couple of years where the projects are able to, they are able to put on time the project, the all the contractors have been pushed very hard. There are a lot of projects which are delaying. Definitely, I'm not saying that it is not delaying, but it is not delaying like earlier, where the 2 year project used to happen in 10 years. We have seen number of statement, especially from Mr. Nitin Gadkari, when he has fired his teams in the public forum for executing or delaying the projects. So these things are happening now, on I would say more transparent basis as compared to the earlier scenario. Second is because of the digital platform, or the way the economy is progressing, everything is coming virtually, on a digital platform. So there is a lot of transparency in terms of the pricing. There is a disclosure. There are project progress. Everything you can monitor on some or other platform. So even the public knows that what is happening on on a government side or the bureaucracy side. So I think the mechanism is falling in place. Of course, it is still not reached to the probably where the the private sector works, or the kind of efficiency the private sector brings it. But at the same time, the government is also putting, I mean, right from attendance system in their offices to monitoring of employee to the CCTV camera to the project monitoring processes in place. So all these things are falling in place. Of course, the delays still continue to happen, maybe for few more years. But the long-term fundamentals, I think, is falling in place, and that will show the progress, over the period of time. And the mindset of even the people are changing. I mean, it's not like earlier that where the project, they announced the say 2 year timelines or 3 year timelines and used to happen in 20 years or 30 years. Now at least the 3 year has become a 4 years. So still that delays something tolerable because we all have that kind of mindset, and this is what we are doing in day to day. But at the same time, I mean, the way the RBI is putting the things in place, the way the things are happening, especially if you see the vaccination, one of the best thing, probably in the world over. I mean, today, if you, I'll give you the simple example. One of my colleague, recently flown to the Canada. The same Canadian Airlines asked for 18 hours old report. So you have to, test RT-PCR report 18 hours before you go. But at the same time, the Canada, they want a 72 hours because they know that their infrastructure doesn't exist in Canada. So I mean, the India is much ahead of the
Right.
curve in terms of the recently things which are happening. The India is
Right.
also laying the foundation in terms of the digital place where the certificate is generated anytime and any point of time. I mean, through
Hmm.
WhatsApp or SMS or all the online application. But at the same time, it is not available in digital form in other countries. So
Hmm.
things are falling in place. Speed is something which is happening now in India as well. Probably we have to benchmark. If I have to take the example, probably we have to benchmark ourselves with the China. So China is one, who has executed everything with a very high speed. We have not reached there, but we are very close to that actually. So you see the highways which are built, the speed which is happening right now, the infrastructure which is built in the northeast, states, the defense side, a lot of things are happening in the country. All these things will put together finally ends up with a lot of employment in the country and a lot of capital generation, and probably
Hmm.
people will be coming out of the poverty. So things are happening. Still maybe that everywhere the benchmark is not same, or I would say the speed is not same everywhere. Couple of places we have gone ahead of curve, couple of places we are on the curve,
Correct.
and couple of places we are still lagging behind. But I think the intent is very fair and transparent, and that's what
Hmm.
gives us a confidence that even if we are not there, probably we'll be there in next couple of years.
Sure. I
Amol,
think.
if you allow me to
Sure.
also add to what Kailash is saying, Kailash has brought a very interesting comparison between India and China. That China, in perhaps in US and Europe, we are doing much better in terms of inoculation and so on and so forth. But China obviously is way ahead. The difference will be, and we in India always try to compare ourselves that when we will catch up with China and do better than them. To my mind, it's a long way off because India is a democracy. China is not. China is one party rule, autocracy. So, therefore, if they want to build a road, and this is what we discussed land labor capital organization, if they want to acquire land, they will give a notice, tell these people that 7 days you move out, finished, over. You cannot appeal to anyone. In India, you are given notice, not 7 days, 7 years. The notice will not even reach, nothing will happen because we are democracy. Now we can argue till the cows go home. Is one party rule better or democracy is better? We will not get into politics. But assuming the democracy is better, which at least theoretically it is better, we will take a longish time to implement what we believe we need to implement to make us world leaders in true form in terms of infrastructure. Because land and and let's say affecting the people who are there on that land, it's not going to happen overnight unless those people move out and given alternative arrangements and those land is taken out and used for some other purposes. How we will make the world class infrastructure. So this is will always be to my mind an impediment as long as we have this so-called functional democracy in place.
Absolutely. In fact, thanks for adding that point, and it was a great point. I think we should stop comparing China on all fronts. Valid points, Kailash. So Before I get in Kunal here, let me request all the ladies and gentlemen or participants watching this show, if you have any question, any doubt, please share it here. I'm sure you can you must be joining from any other platform, any platform of social media, whether it's LinkedIn, Facebook, or Twitter. Please feel free to raise your questions if you have any. I will try my best to take that question with the gentleman or that we have in this session. uh, Kunal, let me ask something about the FIIs, because that is a very immediate sector that you cater to. At least that data you must be following on a regular basis. The kind of changes that the budget has shown and the kind of vision they have tried to put in the budget, do you think that the FII will be really bullish henceforth to invest in India?
Okay, so it's a very good question, and I think so. The timing is also perfect to ask this question. We have seen a regular FI FPI selling for over last 2 to 3 months, and that is also evident from the market, the way in which markets are moving. But let's look at the and introspect the reasons why they are selling, and then what is the reasons for selling, and where we are seeing some pressure out there is more to do with global turmoil. And then I would want to add that the kind of liquidity pullback by the global governments globally is going to impact every economy. It is who pulls back quickly, who pulls back late. We will see the difference. But there was a lot of liquidity pumped in by globally by governments in all the countries, which now slowly governments will start pulling back. We haven't evidenced that in India as yet. In fact, India is way more buoyant. That is how I started. So when there is a liquidity pullback, like Bank of England yesterday increased rate of interest by few bips, and that was kind of evident. And all global economies, like we speak, we are witnessing some kind of a turmoil across all the global indices. And at the same time, we are seeing some heavy sell off in US in some of the tech stocks
Hmm.
also. This is creating a lot of pressure on all the FIs FPAs globally. So it
Hmm.
is more to do for the time being with how is the situation globally and how is their other portfolios performing in other economies at this point in time. Once
Hmm.
this is settled a little bit, we will actually see the impact of FIIs, and FIIs, trust me, will not be able to ignore the kind of buoyancy that is there in India, the way in which the capital expenditure has been laid out. And at the same time, if you see, not necessarily that large number of valuations have come only to the sectors in technology, etc., in India,
Hmm.
wherein there is lot of cash burning or kind of an e-commerce kind of a business, but also to a lot of others profit-making companies as well. And if you see Sensex Nifty PE, that is also quite robust in between 19 and 23, which is kind of a valuation even before the bull run. So as one of the fastest growing economy, and also compared to a lot of other economies, like as rightly highlighted a lot of things about China. But
Hmm.
China is all about scale and a lot about manufacturing scale. If you see India, a lot about softwares technology, we kind of house and kind of service global systems and softwares, etc. And that's where we a lot of our companies have very large market shares. So everybody has their own niche where they are essentially playing, and to capture that niche and the appreciation in it is something that FIIs will definitely scout and come back to invest in. And it's, I believe, a matter of time.
Okay, valid points, Kunal. Robin, let me come back to you now and take your views on the green bond, climate change. In fact, these are sounds really good, because all over the world, the countries are talking about it. India has also made a commitment of going for a carbon neutral by 2070. Uh, how do you see this is panning out? How do you think India Inc. will react to this? Because ultimately, we know we have to go for it, but the kind of initiatives the government has taken for the climate change and the issuance of green bond and everything, how do you react to it?
This whole issue of climate change and green bond has to be looked at from an angle called ESG, economic, social, and governance. Now, ESG is the flavor of the time. If companies and organizations are ESG compliant or are working towards ESG, are better companies, are better places to invest. And ESG, that E is nothing else but the green, the climate change. So if an organization, if a country is ESG compliant and going towards ESG, obviously there will be investor interests. As of now, there is nothing to prove that investments in ESG is doing better. However, if you look at the investment community, and Kunal perhaps will be able to bear me out, that most of the large investment community are looking towards, okay, we would like to make profits, we would like to make investments, but we would like to make investments in ESG compliant countries and companies. In this light of the situation, India has a huge way to go. The way to go carbon neutral or avoid global warming is to have solar and wind energy. There is no other option.
Yes.
And we know we need 230 gigawatts of solar energy and maybe another 150, 200 gigawatts of wind. We will necessarily need money for that. And there is no option but for looking for money and going international and raise this money. So as a concept, green bond would work because this is the future and India needs huge energy. We will necessarily have to stop making energy out of coal. वो बंद करना ही पड़ेगा. We will have to stop out of coal, which is 85% of our energy comes out of coal, which has to become zero. Surely by 2070 is our commitment, but I believe by 2050, because we will be challenged world over if we are not carbon neutral by 2050. I'm quite sure that. So we will necessarily have to do that. So there are two arms to this whole answer. One, the country has huge potential for energy being produced out of green, which is wind and solar, and therefore green bond is a necessity to source money at a cheaper cost. Number two, as a country, there will be enhanced interest in investment by other investment community because the country is moving towards ESG compliance. Already the top 500 companies in India have been asked to do a ESG disclosure, who are the listed companies. So the way has started, and therefore, and there is no other option but to become green and carbon neutral by 2050, even if we have promised 2060 and 2070. That's, to my mind, if we have to do it much before. So yes, there is huge opportunity, not only for the Indian entrepreneurs, but also for international investors to come to India and invest in that sort of climate-oriented investments.
Right.
Just to
So,
probably add to what Robin said, if you observe
sure.
in this budget, finance minister had added kind of a mention of circular economy, and maybe there is some kind of a incentives to be given on that aspect as well, and also energy audits. These are again some of the small changes which is indicating a very high niche, and none of us will forget the fact that before a couple of years, when finance minister actually announced about the solar electric vehicles thing mentioned in the budget itself, it kind of turned the tables completely for that industry, and we are seeing much larger adoption. So that's probably what's going to happen even for this aspects as well.
Okay, noted your points, Kunal and Robin. Uh, Kailash, on the ECLGS front, that was kind of an innovative scheme the finance minister launched a year and a half back, and they extended it to your sector as well now. What kind of difference will it make for you now? Because the companies like you, obviously everybody knows that, this will rise again once the situation is normalized because people cannot stop watching movies for sure and they will go back. But, they will have to face the short term challenges. So, how important this ECLJ scheme is for you? What difference will it make in your business? Will the creditors now look at you far more positively?
Samuel, I'll tell you the we have faced the wave first, wave one, wave two, and wave three. In the wave one, I remember very well. I called possibly the every banker of this country, and there was not a single banker who had said yes straight away to lend some money to our kind of sector or our kind of company. Despite that, the my company is a completely debt free company. Okay, so despite that and huge support, in terms of the capital and everything, I mean, not a single company, or even for that matter, NBFCs got ready to lend a single rupee to us. But at the same time, when the scheme announced and in the phase two, we were allowed to borrow, the three or four bankers has called me saying that, please take money from us. This is the kind of big difference, we could see on the ground. And this money came at a rate which was even the lower than the probably the prevailing rate for us in the market. It was much lower, and it was a very competitive rate. Even if you compare, our industry with the AAA kind of rated company who are borrowing at this point of time. So because of the sovereign, guarantee which was there actually from the central government, and because of the bank felt very safe because despite a 7-year period, 2-year moratorium, very low interest rate, and distress sector. I mean, despite that, the bankers were literally after me saying that every banker was trying to say, please take money from us, not from the another banker, and if you want, we are ready to give you 20% extra. You know,
Right.
so all these things has made a lot of difference on the ground, especially for the companies who were, really had a high debt, and a company like us who has a very low debt or a very small debt also, got a very good support. So I think these schemes are very, very critical for a sector like us. We could raise the capital, fortunately, during the pandemic, and that was good money for us in terms of maintaining the
Hmm.
liquidity and sustainability for the company. But at the same time, there are companies, or especially who are not a listed company, for them the capital was also not easy to raise.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
for them, that was the only option. And the ECLGS scheme basically has helped those companies or those people. Because I know a couple of people who has called me saying that send me the brochure the moment the scheme came in, so that who is the banker, how can we connect those bankers, and for every one of them, it was easy for to borrow the money from the bankers because
Hmm.
of the guarantee from the central government and because of this scheme. So I
True.
think these schemes makes a lot of difference on the ground.
Hmm.
Bankers were not very comfortable or very reluctant in the beginning. Now,
Hmm.
because of this scheme, they were also taking slightly, a mild stand on us. So when under the scheme, also funding was given, and over and
Hmm.
above, there was some additional funding was also offered because of they got a comfort basically that the company has already a X money. If we give a maybe X multiplied by 1.2, probably it will be easy for company to survive. So
Hmm.
easy terms, longer moratorium for us, and at a very, very competitive rate. I think those were
Hmm.
very critical and important steps, as a district sector.
Okay. Remarkable case study, Kailash, and that shows actually the power of a scheme which was launched in the middle of the pandemic, I guess. I was talking to, since I cover banks very aggressively, I was talking to some bankers and they were in fact telling me they disbursed more funds after the government, instilled some confidence in them. Uh, Coming back to Kunal on the digital front, they have, announced many things, many new things. I will not get into details about cryptocurrency, but the digital tax which they have imposed uh, on the digital assets. That is one, and second is the digital rupee that they have launched. I mean, that will be soon out. In fact, RBI had already clarified that at an appropriate time they will come with NCBDC, central bank digital currency. How do you think these two things will actually make a difference in the current BFSI space or a finance space?
Good question. I think so. You picked up very well and a very hot topic in terms of where crypto is interchangeably used with this particular digital currency as well. However, there is a big distinction, and to tell you, digital currency is all about making payments easy. It is just the method in which a lot of lending companies, lot of millennials, the way in which they use the payment system, lot of banking systems, smoothness, seamlessness in terms of payment, and the integrated payments that happen. That is going to happen. In fact, what is going to happen is a lot of foreign reimbursements, lot of payments are going to happen directly from the ecosystem. So that's one. It's a welcome move, I think so. It's not necessary to probably hold your money on behalf at a particular place, but it can directly be there with the government custody. So that's definitely going to impact the way in which people keep their money, and how probably treasuries function, the way in which investments happen. The second aspect is essentially also with respect to how the crypto taxation is going to happen. So government has very well, in fact, finance minister has taxed something that was not getting taxed rather than taxing crypto specifically. So it's more of a coverage. We would so there is still a regulations getting framed for the purpose of cryptocurrencies and similar kind of crypto tokens, which is underway. While that is underway, nobody under any manner, whatever dealings they are doing, allows to actually not tax these particular gains, and therefore it is a coverage to tax pending whatever clarity has to come going forward with respect to the regulations. So I think so that's a in a way while it's a trend, it's also a loophole that's been plugged in, and rightly so. And it also kind of gives people and others a clarity that this is in a way also realized by the government that there is active transactions happening there. So there is some kind of a taxation and regulations that needs to be brought in, rather than necessarily telling that okay, crypto and nobody can trade in this, hence not looking at taxation. This is, I think so, a much better way to deal with it. It is something that we as a country are dealing what is coming from global rather than necessarily what we are creating, and I think so this is much better way to deal with it.
Okay, valid points, Kunal. In fact, a uh, uh, very important points here, safe points here. Considering crypto has been creating a fire in the system everywhere, I will start taking some questions which the audience has. And Robin, let me shoot this question to you, which is about the SEZ Act. So the question, Robin, is what does the SEZ Act make or mean for businesses? Will it get impacted, and what is expected here?
This whole issue of SEZ, there's a good news and there is a bad news. The good news is the government is willing to look at this whole concept, which has not worked at all. India started the SEZ movement, copying China. China has a huge SEZ ecosystem. Almost about 35-40% of Chinese exports comes out of SEZ, but there is very little from Indian exports. So SEZ has not worked in India. So they say the budgetary note says they're now going to look at the SEZ statute. Why it has not worked is what they're perhaps going to look at. That's the good news. So obviously we need to reinvent ourselves in SEZ and make India powerful. The bad news is there are now words which is coming out saying that ACZ will now be able to sell products domestically. That is inappropriate. That you cannot make an SEZ unit as at par with a DTA unit, that is called domestic tariff area unit. Someone who has now set up a factory in the non-SEZ, let's say a steel plant is a non-SEZ, and tomorrow SEZ, a steel plant comes in duty free, they will start selling in India. What will happen to the DTA unit? It is not that is not possible. Already the law says a percentage of SEZ manufacture can be sold in DTA subject to payment of taxes and duties. So while it is good to look at SEZ concept, good to look at statutory provision, good to look at why SEZ is underutilized, but to treat it at par with DTA, that is inappropriate. But if that happens, then there'll be a huge setback in the DTS sector. I do hope the Senior Council prevails over the government and they look at ACZ for exports and exports only, and a part of the so-called surplus manufacture be sold in DTA on payment of duties and taxes.
Okay, I think that's a good clarification, Robin, on that part. Uh, Kunal, I want you to take this question from the audience, which is what impact huge borrowings will have on a debt market?
Sorry, if you can repeat what on debt market, the volumes.
Yes, the what impact of huge borrowings will have on a debt market?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I definitely seen, if you must have observed on the budget day itself in the evening, the whole of the interest rate cycle showed a few about 10 to 20 basis points up in government securities and the lending rates as well. So definitely interest rates is going to inch up a little bit and the borrowing cost is going to inch up. In fact, it was also factored in for quite amount of time. but I also believe at the same time this is a temporary feature as well. We already have LIC IPO coming, sucking significantly large amount of liquidity from the ecosystem. It is expected anywhere between 75,000 crores to about a lakh crore of liquidity may be sucked in, and essentially these kind of measures definitely is going to have some amount of inflation as well, and inflation
Hmm.
is kind of going to be one of the biggest elephant in the room that we all need to deal with. However, the way in which I see it, this is good inflation, growth inflation. It's not something that is coming just out of the blue, uncalculated, unprecedented, and therefore, yeah, while debt markets the rates may go a little bit up, I am sure government will do sufficient measures to provide stability in interest rates and currency, and keeping interest rates low, especially beneficial to the manufacturing sector. Since the government has come way back in 2014, it has been on their agenda. So I think so that will be managed in a very large way, and the impact will not be sporadical and exponential, but it will be there but minimal.
Hmm. Okay, valid points, Kunal. Let me, go ahead with some specific questions with all of you, and I will start with you, Kailash. One specific question is, obviously we discussed a lot of good things that is there that came out of budget. If I ask you one question, and this is for all of you, what is missing? What do you think government should have done, uh, according to you, in the budget?
So let me come first, Amol. I think they could have, raised either a ATC limit, or they could have done, raising some, the tax slabs. I mean, giving more reduction, or maybe in
Hmm.
some way they could have put some money in the hands of the people. I think that was something which I felt especially so missing. While it doesn't impact me as an individual, but I think the masses were expecting, because there is no change in for last 6 7 years, in the tax slabs,
True.
and the even the ATC limit. So people were waiting for something, to keep in their hands more, and that is where I feel is strongly, they could have done some small token amount, which would have made maybe a masses very happy.
No, I think really meaningful. In fact, it would have, in some way, helped the consumption as well. If otherwise the limit of ATC and ATD and all those are very limited now. Considering the cost of inflation has gone up significantly. Robin, what is your view? What is missing in the budget, or what do you think government should have added in the budget?
Um, at a very macro level, it's a 39 lakh crore budget. Let us round it up to 40 lakh crore so everyone can remember. Out of this so-called 39 lakh crore, 19 lakh crore comes from tax revenues, which is so much more or less a permanent source. Again, round it up to 20 lakh crore. So 50% of the revenue comes from permanent source, which is tax revenue. The balance 50% comes from non-permanent sources, market borrowings, printing money, and so on and so forth. Now, this tax revenue of 50 has to now go up, because we as a tax, as a percentage of GDP, continues to stand as around 7%. This has to move up. Therefore, more people have to brought under tax net. We all know that while 6 crore people in India files tax return, only 3 crores population pays taxes out of 135 crore. Now, we say only 3 crore people have taxable income out of 135 crore. However, obviously the answer will come: agricultural income taxes. Agriculture is not taxed. I'm not getting into the political issues, because I don't think agricultural income tax can be taxed today in the short term. So this is one thing which, as a thinking people, have to think through how to make the tax going up. Having said that, let's talk about one specific answer. Two specific things perhaps we should have looked at. One is the rural development. The money spent in rural development this year is 2 lakh crore. Last year was also 2 lakh crore, which is actually 2 lakh 6,000 crore to be precise. Now, rural development deserves more money to be appropriated. You cannot keep rural development the same limit as last year. Where will the money come from? Divestment or disinvestment. We are only going to get 65,000 crore from disinvestment, as opposed to 1,75,000 crore, which we originally suggested or thought. Therefore, more divestment has to happen. There is no option. Political will has to take place. put that little money, 30, 40,000 crore, if we can get towards rural development, and that will bring a singular change to our economy. So on the long-term basis, tax as a percent of GDP has to go up, but in the short term for this year, more expenditure on rural development, perhaps through divestment, which is definitely lacking.
Okay. Again, very meaningful, Robin. Kunal?
Yeah, I think so. Robin covered very well in terms of what has to happen at a macro level, and then let me try and jump and give some glimpse on what should happen in capital markets, which I would have wished more from this budget. So, if you see, I have been writing and regularly for last couple of years that STT has to be removed or essentially has to be reduced. It will dramatically reduce the impact cost on the exchanges and bring and attract a lot of FII and foreign institutional investors. There is some respite on long-term capital gain tax by uh, capping the surcharge, which is a very, very welcome move. However, I would still want a little bit more over there. The second aspect, essentially from a macro level and an economy level perspective, is if we see government and finance minister has done one fantastic thing of putting 68% of defense budget, which is one of the biggest budget, into domestic spending. That means the money will plow in and we'll reduce our um so-called imports and going out of the money going out of the country. So this is a very, very welcome and a beautiful move, and this is going to reduce the fiscal deficit. But look at the things that is going to actually bleed us in future in similar pattern. Today it is defense, but tomorrow it is the Google, the Amazon of the world, and the Apples of the world, which is going to get very high amount of foreign currency out of the country, and we are paying left, right, and center around it already today, but it's growing at a very large pace. So government needs to enable and take a giant step in terms of building the cloud infrastructure in the country to enable domestic cloud companies or government companies like they had Mini Ratna and Navratnas historically to be built in that manner, which I would have probably wished some kind of a you can say initiation in this, given the kind of representations that were laid down before the budget, which I necessarily didn't see forthcoming in this budget. Maybe, but lot of digital things already seen. So maybe I can hope these kind of things coming in future, which will help the infrastructure, the digital infrastructure within the country, and not necessarily foreign currency going out of the country. So I would say those are probably some high level things that I could think of.
Okay. Again, very meaningful on the cloud part. I think there are a lot of issues with the data which government is trying to handle on the cloud part as well. Many companies are facing that problem, and obviously, since you come from financial institutions, that is a hardcore topic there.
True.
Well said, Kunal. So let me, in fact, on the the domestic investments funds and that you said, the president of India, Mr. Kovind said something very nice that day, while he was giving a speech before the budget in the parliament. He says that the defense has already pitched for 209 products which will be manufactured in India. So they have prepared a list of 209 products which they will stop importing. That itself is a very big news, that and a big push towards
Correct.
Atmanirbhar Bharat. So well
Absolutely.
point, Kunal, on that front. So let me shoot one more question to all of you, and I will start with you, Robin. The question is, the government has spoke about 2025, 25 years of the budget. Do you see it's a 25-year budget? Do you see that when we take a view of 25 years, then we should have added more, or it's just okay to have a 25-year budget right now with this vision which they have created?
Short answer, yes, it is a 25-year budget because it is a capacity building budget. They're building capacity of hardware, which is infrastructure, and they're building software, which is quality of human lives, be it education or be it through water, through any other means. So it is definitely a long term, whether it is 20, 25, 30 is $1 million question. But yes, it is a long term budget with a vision, building a capacity for India to be the world leader.
Sure. Kailash?
Definitely, it's a futuristic budget and something very important and critical. I mean, I will not get into the number of years because it's very difficult to say something. But I think
Right.
if the government continue to put focus and every year supported by the the monetary amounts in the budget, then definitely it's going to be a maybe 25 years.
Noted. Kunal?
So let me try and pick couple of more points that was announced in budget. If you see, there was a laydown for 2020 to 23, seeing 5G economy. Okay, and at the same time, there was a lot of mention around the villages of India getting fiber optic and internet and similar kind of things. And accordingly, there were a lot of such things which laid the foundation. So definitely, it's a futuristic budget. Not everything was done today, but I think so. It's a fantastic start for the 25 years roadmap.
Well said, gentlemen, and I think those are meaningful points here. The time is almost up, uh, and I should stop here. But again, thank you so much, Kailash, Robin, and Kunal for sharing meaningful insights and taking part into ETCFO Budget 2022 series.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning into this budget series, and being with us since last 5 weeks. Thank you so much.